Hello, beautiful people. Jonathan here from Behold Retreats, and today we're going to be talking a little bit about investing in psychedelics. Now, why I decided to pull this together, number one, there's a lot of excitement around investment in psychedelics, and I keep getting asked for my personal opinion and perspective on the market and specific stocks. Number two, I think there's quite a bit of nuance that is often overlooked in relation to what's working best and why, and I think quite a bit of people might be interested in that in relation to choosing specific companies that they might like to invest in. Now, I'll just say this isn't financial advice, right? So very much encourage each of you to do your own research and due diligence. Now, the 7 things I'm going to share with you today is number one, psychedelic therapists are not the same as healers. There's a bit of a distinction to be made there. Number two, medicalization, which is kind of what's happening with plant medicine and psychedelics, has some limitations around it and isn't really aligned with where I believe the market demand is already today and will continue to mature, of course. Number three, very few talented healers want to work for a large corporate. Number four, plant medicine psychedelics is probably best considered more of a service or experiential service rather than as a product, and I'll share more about that. Fifth, the energy behind the medicine is actually quite important, impacts the journey, believe it or not. Number six, there's some organization out there that are kind of rebranding things in particular ways and seeking patents to control medicine. So you might be cautious about those types of investments. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I'm going to speak a little bit around what's worked for me personally and recommend that you find what works best for you and seek to invest accordingly. So number one, psychedelic therapists are not the same as healers. So therapists that are working with psychedelics are typically focused on the mental, the emotional, and the physical aspects of helping a client prepare for a journey, holding space during their experience, and then helping them integrate the experience after the work with psychedelics. Now, healers, in contrast, can do all of those things, but in addition, they can also transmute energy on behalf of their clients. And I know that sounds a bit perhaps abstract and woo-woo, but the difference when working with a healer versus working with someone who's a therapist is really quite profound. And so, if you're looking for those deeper breakthroughs and to sustain more benefits, those people who have worked with healers really know that there is a fundamental difference to that. So my first recommendation to you would be look for those companies that are dedicated to the energetic aspects of healing, because I believe that they will be the winners over time, because that's ultimately where customers will start going, keep going, and obviously that's one of the things that we look for in terms of a worthwhile investment. Second, a few of the limitations around medicalization and also what I see in terms of market demand. So at the moment, obviously, billions of dollars being pumped into psychedelic medicine, which is great. I believe that whatever sacrifices need to be made in order to fit the square peg into the round hole and provide access to the millions who perhaps can't travel for retreats such as our own is a very meaningful and worthwhile task. The second point that I point out is that at the moment, going down the medicalization route, we do need to be diagnosed as sick in order to be able to explore and elevate our consciousness, right? So whether it's anxiety, PTSD, trauma, etc., we need to be seen as deficient in some sort of a way if we medicalize these substances. So that in of itself, I think, is a little bit limiting in terms of the way that the medical world is looking at these medicines. And I'd also point out that we've set the bar for mental health collectively after generations of colonialism, of war, and of trauma. So naturally we've probably set it in the wrong place. And there's a lot of people out there who can speak to the fact that they thought they were doing pretty well, myself included, ahead of exploring plant medicine, and then realizing that actually there is quite a bit to heal in terms of our own trauma, intergenerational trauma, etc. So you might be asking, well, if the medicine works, then what's the issue? Well, I think part of the issue is that fundamentally the science doesn't recognize the energetic aspects of this work. So, they're still unfortunately looking at this work through a kind of Newtonian and rationalistic worldview. So there's a focus on protocols, there's a focus on compound isolation, right? Finding that single molecule that's going to make the fundamental difference to the journey. And they're looking for kind of deterministic results, right? So if I treat one patient with with this amount, then it's always going, or it's going to cure anxiety X% of the time or Y% of the time. So it's a bit of a limited view in terms of how these medicines work. The other aspect is that scientists do risk what I would describe as academic ridicule, and so that's part of the reason that they don't recognize the energetic or spiritual aspects of this work, and they're not allowed to actually work with plant medicines themselves. So the people who are leading the science in relation to psychedelics are not encouraged to use the medicine. I think that's a bit of a hangover from some of the things that took place in the 60s and 70s in the US, and the LSD and the research escaping the lab. So I guess in a sense, the analogy that came to me is that we've kind of got some scuba instructors guiding Everest expeditions, which I think you could probably recognize has some limitations to it. So I think, the last piece is really that, customers are much more interested in the deeper, more spiritually centric types of experiences. So my recommendation would be to look for those organizations that are taking the latest and greatest science into account, but really are putting spirit first, and they're fundamentally aligned with the types of experiences that customers are seeking out. So from what we see, most customers are seeking out ayahuasca, psilocybin, and 5-MeO DMT retreats. We do get quite a few clients that come through after having done first a protocol with ketamine. Often they've had some positive experiences, and then they've had one or two quite bad ones, and they're not going back in that direction. I'll speak a little bit more about that later. Third recommendation would be that to recognize that few talented healers actually want to work for a large corporate, right? So corporations in of themselves exist to maximize return to shareholders, which is part of the collective problem, right? That we're kind of chasing after money, disconnected from the externalities, the realities of pursuing profit at the expense of virtually everything else. So the second piece in relation to that is that healers don't really want to live in a place where they're battling traffic on the way to a clinic in Midtown, and they're going to be measured on what percentage of utilization they had over the course of January. It's just not how they want to work, and their work is so much in high demand that they can dictate terms. So what that means is that there's the way that this ecosystem is going to be evolving is probably quite a bit more decentralized than what a lot of the large corporates that are pumping hundreds of millions or billions of dollars into R&D and patents and legal battles are hoping for, shall we say. There's also a number of organizations that I would say are doing quite a bit of financial engineering. And again, do your own due diligence in relation to that. My observation would be that perhaps some of these leaders of these organizations might be better off spending some of their time and their energy going down to South America to get some lessons from some stronger plant medicines that are out there. I've spoken to quite a number of the leaders in the psychedelic space, CEOs and leadership, and was very surprised to see that few of them have actually gone down for, say, an ayahuasca retreat. Many of them have explored, intentional psilocybin ceremonies, typically at home. That seemed to be very much the theme, but I was pretty surprised. It's not to say that there's a right and wrong here, but certainly they haven't necessarily explored the full extent of plant medicines, despite their leadership positions in the ecosystem and industry. So my recommendation here would be really consider, in investing in an organization, really consider why healers would want to work for that organization. So if it's just money first, in my mind, over time, it's unlikely to be a winning investment, a winning organization. Number four, I would very much encourage people to consider plant medicine and psychedelics as a service rather than as a product. There's a lot of investment that's coming into plant medicine from the cannabis space. People are seeing very much as a sort of adjacent market. And you can understand, given that they both come from plants, given that there's, a history of criminalization, etc., that, some people think that there's a lot in common. There is a little bit in common, but I would say that broadly speaking, expert guidance is really required when we want to go deep and elevate our consciousness and sustain the benefits from these experiences. So, not to say we can't have profound experiences sitting on the beach by ourselves and, something that we paid $10 for. But ultimately, I think people are looking for much deeper experiences than that, much more healing experiences. And so my recommendations would be that you consider investing in organizations that are thinking of psychedelics and plant medicine more as a treatment, as an experiential service, rather than as a product. Fifth, I think the energy behind the medicine used is of high importance. And so, healers in particular, when they're working with medicine, are super particular about where they're getting their medicine from, because the source and the quality and the energy behind the medicine has a fundamental impact on the client journey. So, we've got private healers who buy their medicine from people who sing mantras, who sing songs to the mushrooms every day as they're watering them. That's something I would have laughed at 5 years ago, but now I totally get it. It really makes a fundamental difference. The energy behind the thing is the thing itself. And so, if you hear an organization talking about their state-of-the-art 50,000 square foot facility that's going to be able to produce Z amounts of medicine every 6 weeks, maybe not. So I would really recommend that everyone take the time and the energy to really sense the energy behind a company in terms of their motivations, and because that's going to shine through in terms of whether their product is being selected by people who they want to use it. Again, what's going to work best over time is what's going to have more people gravitating in that direction. Number six, there's a number of organizations that I would describe as kind of rebranding particular things and also seeking to control this ecosystem. I think, given that plant medicine and psychedelics are playing a major role in shifting our paradigm out of limitation and scarcity and kind of a command and control hierarchical worldview, it's a little bit disappointing to see organizations move into plant medicine in kind of a way that reflects the old world paradigm, if I may say so. It's worth recognizing that these were made illegal in the 60s as a result of some of the challenges to the power dynamics in politics at the time. So I think it's worth recognizing those companies that are trying to establish monopoly status, and also recognizing those companies that are doing their utmost to rebrand some of the medicines that are not psychedelic or not plant medicine as such. So in particular, there's a number of organizations out there that are eager to go to market, to be first to market. And so rebranding something like ketamine as psychedelic medicine, it's not psychedelic, it's a dissociative. It can have benefits, absolutely, but there are some downsides as well. Certainly these can be, the bad experiences can be very bad. It can open portals to some pretty dark places. And so unless we're working with healers that are able to manage that energetically, those can be some pretty challenging experiences. And also ketamine can be addictive. And so, like I shared before, we get quite a few clients who have gone through a protocol, had some good experiences, had some bad experiences, and then, now they're looking for something more natural. So my recommendation would be that, if the business model depends upon control, massaging the truth, or synthetics, then, you might think about that a little bit more deeply, and recognize that there are some larger forces at play in relation to how this ecosystem will evolve. So the medicine is always at work in relation to what's happening in our world. Last, I think it's important to say that that people can still benefit, have profound experiences with just working with a therapist, not a healer, working in the middle of a city, shorter session, 4 or 5 hours as opposed to a week-long retreat. And of course, people can still benefit with commercially produced synthetic compounds, right? So what I'm sharing here is what I understand based upon my own journeys, my own experiences, some of the nuance, right, that might help you select this company versus that company. And when people are exploring these experiences, many of the clients that come to us have done their research for years in advance, because of course we're talking about putting our minds and our spirit on the line in relation to these experiences. And so people are coming in and making, generally speaking, very educated decisions in relation to how they want to continue their spiritual growth in exploring plant medicine and of course their own consciousness. So my final recommendation would really just be to find what works best for you, right? And invest in that. You really can't lose this way, because if it's something that's worked in a very deep and a profound way for you, then of course, you'll be contagious about the way that you speak about what that company is doing, and other people will follow in your footsteps. So, in the end, and I think the place I'd like to finish is, ultimately this isn't really about money. It's about improving each other and improving the world as a result. So the last piece I just wanted to finish on is we are doing a small fundraise. We're just looking for 5 investors and advisors at this stage at $100K each. We are looking for people who are bringing more than purely capital. So this is something that I'd ask you to take into consideration ahead of a chat. The business is already profitable, so this is just going to be a one-off opportunity, and the funds will be used to develop our brand, our team, and to invest in a new location. So if that's something that's potentially of interest to you, contact me at jonathan@behold-retreats.com. This is January 2022. It will all be wrapped up by the end of February. So hope all of you have an amazing day. Hope that was of some use to you in terms of trying to identify the right types of companies to invest in, and wishing you all much love and aloha. Have a great day.